All right, all right. Justin, I think you're already here, right?
Yep, all set.
There you go. Nice.
Great.
Cool.
So we will have one more minute to go, and then you can kick it off with your session, automating third-party patching and app creation in config manager in Intune.
Alrighty. Yep, sounds good.
What will the people get out of this session? What's the key takeaway?
Hopefully that it can be real easy to do, right? So, I mean,
All right.
the goal is in the 50-minute session, we'll go through set up apps in SCCM, updates in SCCM, apps in Intune, and updates in Intune, all from pretty much a clean environment. So hopefully that, it's just simple.
All right. Looking forward. So kick it off, and good luck.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'll go ahead and get started then. So my name's Justin Chalfant. I'm the founder here at Patch My PC. Screen share, does that look okay for you guys? You see the RDP window?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, we do.
Good.
Okay, awesome. So what we're going to do in this session is just kind of go through what it actually looks like to set up our product, how it integrates in both Configuration Manager as well as Microsoft Intune, and pretty much just what that process looks like. So in the current lab, we can see that we have a pretty clean site, right? So we don't have any applications. We don't have any third-party updates. We just have a couple Microsoft updates in here. And then same thing for Microsoft Intune. So if we jump over and look at our Intune apps here, we can see that, we don't have any apps as well. So just going to go through like what that process looks like to get everything up and running. So first step, like if you are evaluating our product to see what it does, we do offer a full access 30-day trial. So that's going to be where you want to start, like if you want access to every feature as well as every product that we offer within the catalog. And then kind of first step, just go grab the installer. So the install is only about 5 megs, super lightweight, and pretty easy to get going. So just go ahead and run that, and we'll get the setup started. Now, there's a couple of options here. If you're in a Intune standalone mode where you're not using ConfigMan, you will get prompted for whether or not you want to enable Intune standalone mode. So if you are Intune only, you can enable this feature, and that will allow you to install the publisher, which is going to be what automates the Intune app creation on a Windows 10 VM as well. Traditionally, if you're only using like the config manager piece, you would install this on your top level software update point within your config man site. So we'll just go through kind of basic next, and then okay. Now, what this software is designed to do is just facilitate the publishing of either config manager apps and updates or Intune apps and updates. So once we get the products and settings that we want configured, the goal for this tool is that it just runs in the background and just automatically keeps your apps and updates up to date. And then you can enable things like Teams notifications or email alerts for that. So first setting that we're going to have that's kind of applicable when we get going is we do have a prerequisite of a certificate. So if you've ever done third-party patching in WSUS or SCCM, there is a certificate that's used. And what that is essentially used for is it needs to be created and deployed to your clients. And that's how they can ensure when they're getting these third-party updates that it's coming from a trusted source. So you do have a couple of options that you can use. You can import a cert from a PKI, or the easiest option is you can also just do a self-signed cert and build that directly within our software here. So we'll go ahead and use that option for now and generate the certificate. Now, what's nice about this option with some of the improvements in Config Manager 1806 current branch or newer, once you've generated the cert, you can actually go into your software update point and you can enable it to automatically import that into SCCM and then automatically deploy that to your clients. So we're going to go enable third-party updates and say SCCM can manage the cert, which what that essentially means is the next time that you synchronize your software update points, let me go ahead and trigger that, we're going to actually see that SCCM will go out and detect that there's a new signing certificate for third-party updates for WSUS, and it's going to automatically read and import that into the database. So if we come back now and look at our software update point, we'll be able to see that it read that certificate that we generated, and it's automatically going to deploy that to the client. So any updates that are published from our tool are automatically trusted. So once that setting is enabled, the only other thing that you're going to want to check is whether or not the client setting for third-party updates is enabled. As long as both of those are configured, you'll be able to have that certificate automatically deploy, and you don't have to worry about any external tools like a GPO like you would traditionally have had to use to deploy that signing certificate. So at this point, we're pretty much good with the prereqs. The certificate's really the only piece, and that's only applicable to the config manager updates, not necessarily the Intune piece if you're more interested in that aspect. So next up, we're going to actually go configure which products we want to publish. So we have kind of 4 main tabs that could potentially be used. We have our updates tab. So that's going to correspond to what third-party updates you want to publish to WSUS and essentially sync over to SCCM if you're in an SCCM environment. And they're going to be which updates will appear in the All Software Updates tab. We then have Config Manager Apps. So these are going to be the products that you want to automatically deploy as an application. So this will correspond just to your traditional applications that you can use to deploy even if it's not there. So through task sequences, collection deployments, that's really the goal for apps. Where the updates piece, that's only designed to update applications that are already existing in your environment. So that's kind of the key difference there. One can be used to build apps and keep them up to date for initial deployments, and then one's designed to update existing apps once the machines are already deployed and they have those apps deployed. We then have our Intune Apps tab, so that's going to be essentially corresponding to our apps in Intune, so Win32 apps that we can automatically generate and package for you. And then one of our newer features, which we'll be covering, is our Intune Update. So that's pretty similar to the Config Manager piece for updates, where it's designed to only update machines that have outdated versions. And we'll see what that looks like once we go into here. So we're going to start off with the Updates tab. So we're going to get some updates publishing into SCCM. So there's a couple things you can do here. You can go ahead and use the scan feature. That's pretty helpful because we do have a large list of products. So if you go to our website, we've got a supported products page. This is always changing, probably somewhere around 350, 400 or so products that we support today. And what's cool, if we don't have a product that you use actively, we do have a user voice at ideas.patchmypc.com where you can go in and you can submit a new application request that you would like to see added to our catalog. And that essentially will be how we add new products. So if you go to patchmypc.com/roadmap, you can also see our public roadmap as well as products that we've recently shipped. So anything in the dark blue under new products, these are going to be new apps that we added in a specific month based on that customer feedback. So, it's always changing. So, if you are using the product and you want to see new apps, be sure to use our user voice. So what this is going to do, since there's a lot of products and I don't really know what I may need, what we can do is we can enter our config manager database and database name, and we can actually query against your environment. If you wanted to, you could even limit the querying to specific collections. If you said, I only want to return the apps that I know about on a specific collection, for example. So what we're looking at here, we're matching up all the apps in our catalog with the application inventory from hardware inventory and telling you, based on all these products that we support, how many of these actually exist today. And this could be a feature that you may want to use, for example, if you were just evaluating the product and you wanted to see which apps that we support that you already have. Cool. So just for demo's sake, I'm not going to go through and enable everything that already exists because it's a lot of products. But for the updates, what we're going to do is enable Google Chrome. So let's say we want to enable Google Chrome 64-bit. Now, before we go through and actually start publishing, I do want to cover some of the customizations that we can actually apply within our updates and apps. So if we right-click, we're going to have different options available both at the all products, the vendor, as well as the product level. So let's say, for example, under all products, we wanted to change the way that our updates and app install. So one example of this could be if you wanted to automatically close any applications before updates are applied, we can use a right-click option and we can apply that. For this example, we'll keep that enabled. We're aware of about 5 products or so that may have issues updating if the application's open. So things like Notepad++, Java Runtime, there's a couple where you may want to enable this option, or alternatively, if you don't want to auto close for a user, you can choose to skip it if it's running, and then it would evaluate again during the next software update, deployment and evaluation cycle on the client. We can also do things like delete shortcuts. So say you want to delete public desktop icons that apps like Chrome would put on there. Right-click option will do all that for you. We can also turn off the self-update feature for products if you want to ensure that the updates are only being applied from the updates that you're publishing. And then probably one of the more helpful options is enabling logging. So we can simply right-click all products, and we can turn on installation logs for every product that supports a logging command line. So that would be all MSIs, as well as the majority of EXE products in our catalog. And we can also do things like automatically copy failed logs. So let's say we get a non-zero exit code for an update. We could even do something like copy only the failed logs to say a secondary folder, like a UNC path that you could then use for diagnosing why that update didn't fail. So this can be quite helpful for troubleshooting. Instead of getting generic exit codes like 1603, you could actually look at the client log to understand exactly why a specific product is not able to update or install successfully. So since we did that at the all products level, we can see it automatically applied to that Google Chrome update that we have within our environment. So once we get to the individual product level as well, there are 3 additional customizations that you can potentially apply. So you can even add your own pre or post update scripts that would execute before a update is installed or an app is installed. You can modify the command line, or if it's an MSI-based product, you can also add a transform directly into the application or update install. Now for Google Chrome, just as an example, what we'll do here, let's go ahead and do a custom pre or post script. And we're going to run a post update script for Google Chrome. And just to show you what we're doing, let's go ahead and browse out. We're going to run a PowerShell script for Chrome. And all we're going to be doing here is setting the home page for all users for Google Chrome. So for example, let's say we wanted to set that to the Ninja site. I'm just going to edit one value in just this example script. And what that's going to do is just change a registry value for the home page location for Google Chrome within their policy key. So we'll go ahead and apply that and choose OK. So that's going to ensure whenever a Chrome update or app is installed, we kind of have some very specific customizations to our environment for the home page. And you can, of course, be however flexible you want if you did need customizations. And then the other app that we'll do for a demo is Java 8 32-bit. Let's see here. Apply that, Java 8 32-bit. And we can see we also have those global options applied. And Java is a little bit special. We have a pre-action that applies automatically. And what that's going to do is it's going to automatically run a pre-action that's going to remove old versions. Because by default, their exe installer will not automatically remove previous JREs before the installation. So we'll make sure that you're only left with the latest Java 8. So that's what we're going to do for software updates. So next we'll jump over to Config Manager Apps. And just some basic settings here before you can actually start creating the applications for you. You just need to tell us where your SCCM provider is, SMS provider. You would give us the source path of where you want all the app content to be downloaded to that would be used within the deployment types that we create for you. And then there's just a couple of other options that you can change. Like for example, do you want the app to be allowed in a task sequence? We'll automatically do that checkbox for you. You can move the app to a custom folder if you wanted to. So this one's kind of cool. Let's say that by default, we wanted to move any app created by PatchMyPC to the PatchMyPC applications folder in the SCCM console. So for example, we go over there, we can see that we have that folder existing. So by default, we'll put any apps that we create there. And then lastly, you can choose how you want to update any previously created apps. So by default, we update it in place, meaning let's say Chrome 83 was published, 84 comes out the next week. We would update the existing 83 app to 84 to ensure, like, if it's being referenced in task sequences, we auto update that as well. So new machines are always getting the latest version. But if you want more change control, you can choose to create a new app for each version. And then lastly, we can just distribute the apps automatically to distribution point groups within ConfigMan. Now for this example, what we're going to do, Config Manager Apps, let's go ahead and deploy 7-zip. Let's just right click. But let's say that you had a lot of options and products you enabled over in the Updates tab. We can also duplicate all of those apps and options. So if we were to choose copy, we can see that we automatically copied all the right-click options as well as all the products that we enabled as a software update. So we can see we have all of that created as well as all the custom actions. Now, in addition to Chrome and Java, I am going to enable 7-zip as an application, and we'll see what it looks like on the client side when we deploy it. Now, the applications within the Config Manager Apps does have a few additional options that are specific to applications in SCCM. So for example, we can see that all these 3 or 4 options are unique to applications. So for example, if you wanted to manage the user experience, you would have things where you could modify some of the built-in options that you may be accustomed to within Config Manager, like max runtime, whether or not you want it to only run when a user is logged in or something like that, for example. So we'll leave just the defaults for that. But for 7-zip, we are going to enable an option where we say for this specific product, we want to be more granular and move it to a subfolder. So in addition to the global level, you can also configure apps to move at the specific product or vendor level as well. Okay, that looks good to me. What I'm going to do is before we go into the Intune piece, I'm just going to start a synchronization on our side. And what that's going to do is start downloading the updates and apps and start to get them publishing into Config Manager. So let me just go over and check out the questions while we're waiting for the sync. This might just take a minute. Yeah, so question, if you already have a third party, or if you already have a WSUS signing certificate that's in use, whether that's, you're using the end console publishing directly in SCCM, or maybe you're using SCUP or even another vendor, if the certificate already exists, we'll actually just automatically detect it. So all we're really doing here is we're just checking the WSUS API that's going to read the WSUS signing certificate. And that on your WSUS server, that essentially just lives in the WSUS certificate store. So let's say that you already had a cert, whether it was self-signed or whether it was imported from a PKI, and you've already used third-party update publishing. When you install our tool, this would just automatically show up as green, and you would see that we could reuse an existing certificate. So good question there. Any questions about anything that we've looked at so far? Feel free to add that in the chat. Looks like that's the only one so far. Oh, thanks for your YouTube videos. Yeah, glad that is helping. Yeah, like doing the videos for sure. As far as CMG clients go, shouldn't be an issue, especially if you're using. It was also asked about work groups. So as long as you have the option for Config Manager to manage the cert, that will apply via client settings. So for example, workgroups used to be a little bit more tricky if you're using GPOs to deploy the WSUS cert to trusted root and trusted publishers. But now that SCCM can do that natively, if you enable this option, it really doesn't matter if they're in a workgroup. It would automatically install the cert and they would be ready to install the third-party updates, even if they're on a workgroup. The only thing to note with CMG is that you do need to deploy your software update deployment package for third-party updates only to Cloud Management Gateway or your Cloud DP, depending on what version you're on. And that's because they are signed using your unique WSUS cert. So it's not like the clients could go out and download directly from, say, Adobe or Oracle, because it is specific to your environment. So keep that in mind. Like traditionally with Microsoft updates over CMG, you can just let them go directly to Windows updates, and they can pull it right from the internet. Third-party updates you do need to have on your DP, your Cloud DP or CMG. But while this is publishing, one thing that we'll take note of, we can see that we're getting some alerts coming through. So one tab that you probably will want to configure is the emails and or Teams webhook. So what will happen is whenever any new update or application is published, because the goal is once you set this tool up once, you really don't have to come back in here. You can automatically get notified whenever anything new happens in your environment. So for example, we can see we got a Teams alert that said a new Google Chrome update was published into our environment. We can see things like severity, classification, CVEs. CVEs are also directly clickable. So you can go directly out to the National Vulnerability Database and get data about the updates that are publishing to your environment real time. So we can see we had those 2 updates and we had those 3 applications automatically created within our environment. So at this point, we did enable the option for our software update point to automatically trigger. So whenever any new third-party updates are published from our tool, we'll automatically trigger a software update point sync within SCCM. And then if we look at our WSync Manager log, we'll see that those third-party updates essentially show up right away because we trigger that sync. So we can see we've already got those 2 updates showing up. So now if we come back into our Config Manager console, we'll be able to see those updates showing up and within our console just like any other updates. So while we wait a few minutes to let our clients kind of scan in and see some data within Config Manager, let's jump over to the Intune piece and let's enable our Intune Apps. So we just check that box. Let's go ahead and choose Options. The only thing that you're going to have to configure is a app registration within Azure AD. And that's going to grant us permissions to ensure that we can connect to your Intune tenant using Microsoft Graph to create the application. So within the UI, you can click out and this will show you exactly what minimum permissions that we need in order to create those applications. So we can click test once you do that, and that will make sure that we can query Microsoft Intune. In addition to that, there's just a couple of options that you can apply. So you can choose how you want apps to be updated, whether or not you want to copy any older assignments from previous apps when a new one comes out. So this is kind of like, since supersedence doesn't exist in Intune, we kind of had to make something to ensure that we can always deploy the latest version. So we essentially built supersedence ourselves. So let's say Chrome 83 is published, 84 came out. If you choose the option to copy assignments from previous versions of an app, version 84 of the update would essentially automatically copy any assignments for Azure groups that you're targeting in Intune and automatically deploy it to make sure you're deploying the latest one. And then by default, we also would delete the assignments on that previous version to ensure that you're always deploying the latest one. And then optionally, if you wanted to totally delete any previous version of an app from Intune, the Win32 app, you can choose to delete the older versions as well. So that's kind of the only options that you get. So pretty simple as far as the configuration goes. And then outside of that, it's the same kind of option for enabling products. So we have all our same right-click options like, disabling shortcuts, things like that. And we can even automatically duplicate, if we wanted to, the apps that we have for SCCM updates if you're using kind of all 4 publishing methods, if you're in like co-management and you want to make sure you do things across the board. But for this example, let's just go through and we're going to enable Google Chrome as an Intune app. So we'll go ahead and enable Google Chrome 64-bit. One cool feature about the Intune apps is we can auto create assignments for you. So instead of having to manually go into Intune for each individual app, let's say at the all products level, we wanted to make an available deployment for all these apps. So we could choose OK on that. And if we choose the group that we're targeting, you can even get additional options like how do you want your restart period to happen if we got a restart exit code. So a lot of these options that correspond to Intune, we would be able to automatically configure globally and apply it to any app that you created. So in our case, we're going to make it available at the all users level so that any app that we enable, users could get within company portal. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and also do, let's do Microsoft Edge maybe. So we'll do Microsoft Edge 64-bit. We can see that we have that assignment automatically added for us. Let's go ahead and enable logging as well. Or let me actually do that at the global level. Let's say we wanted to enable logging for all products in Intune. We can go ahead and enable that logging option for both of those apps. And let's say we wanted to turn off self-updates for the apps. We'll choose apply. Okay, so that's the Intune Apps piece. Now let's just jump over to Intune updates. That's going to be a similar concept. And we're going to enable we're going to enable 7-zip 64-bit as an update within Microsoft Intune. Now, the key difference here between the Intune apps and Intune updates is we're going to create a requirement for the application in Intune for the update version, and we're going to make it only applicable based on our requirement rules when there's an older version. So you could use this to only update existing products. So for example, you could target this broader to a larger group of machines, and we would be able to patch older versions even if it wasn't originally installed from Intune to make sure that you're compliant. So for example, just for this demo, we're going to say we want to target all devices to actually deploy these updates out. And you can see the key difference here is that you can only create required assignments within Intune for our updates, and that's because they're only designed to update existing products. So for example, you could even do things like staging out deployments as well. So you can kind of think, if you're coming from Config Manager, creating ADRs with multiple different collections targeting them. In this specific demo, we don't really have a test 1 group, a test 2 group. But if you did, for example, you could say, here's my test 1 group, and let me make this one available right away, and let's make the deadline 1 day from now. You could then have a staging 2 group in maybe 3 days, and then say production 7 days, and we would create 3 different assignments, and you could stagger out your testing even throughout the Intune updates piece. So pretty cool feature if you did want to get some testing in place and have things more staged out, kind of like what you would do if you were coming from, say, Config Manager and multiple collections and maintenance windows. You could kind of replicate some of the stuff you have going on there. So 7-zip is the only one we're going to enable as an Intune update because our client does have an outdated version of 7-zip. So I'm going to go ahead and run a sync, and what that's going to do is it's going to start talking to our Intune tenant, and it's going to start creating some applications for us. So we'll see the publishing happen. If you have the log up and you're kind of interested in that kind of stuff, you'll be able to see things like Google Chrome downloading from the vendor. You'll see us connecting to Intune using Microsoft Graph, and then doing things like uploading the application automatically for you. Now, while we're waiting for that upload to occur, let's jump back to the Config Manager side of things. There we go. So if we refresh, we can now see that we're getting some scan data from our software updates. This would show up just like any other Microsoft update. We can see, how many machines are required, compliant, things like that. Now, in our specific lab, we can see that these are automatically deployed. Now, the reason they're deployed is before we had this set up, we did enable an ADR that auto-deployed them. So that's the only reason they got automatically deployed, is because we have a ADR that's deploying all updates that we publish. Now, of course, you're in complete control over the actual deployment of the updates based on all the existing methods that you have in Config Manager. Now, within that, we also had our testing all in place as well. So we had 3 separate deployments within our ADR. So we can see that we auto-created the update group for you, just like you could do with any Microsoft update using ADRs, and we've got them automatically staged out. So that looks good from the update perspective. And then for the apps, we can see that we have our 2 apps created in the root level, and then we have 7-zip because we defined in a separate folder created at this level. If we go take a look at that, this is going to be just like any other Config Manager app. So we're going to see things like icons, keywords, descriptions, just everything that you would expect to see to have a really great experience within Software Center if you made these available to your users. There we go. So just to speed things up a little bit, I am going to deploy these as available to my all users collection using a PowerShell script. So it's going to deploy those 3 different updates so that we can go over to a client and see what this looks like within Software Center. Now, one thing that you may have noticed, we also have our Intune applications that are sending us the Teams notifications, letting us know that they've been created. So we can see we have Google Chrome created. Same thing as Config Manager apps and updates. We'll link you out to release notes. We'll tell you whether there were any CVEs. And you can get just a lot of information right from those automated notifications. And then just to show you what the email looks like, we can also see the email alert for the Config Manager apps and updates that we published during the first sync. And we can see that the one for our Intune apps and updates just automatically showed up via email as well. And we'll also tell you whether or not they were assigned based on those right-click options. So now if we jump back to the Intune side of things just to see the applications and we click refresh, we can see that we automatically have our 2 Win32 apps for Chrome and Edge created. And then we can also see we have the update made. Now the key difference for any update version is you'll see update 4 before the actual title of that specific update. So for Google Chrome, if we go ahead and click that, we can see same type of thing here. We have our keywords, descriptions, names, categories, icons, everything that would make this a great user experience within Company Portal. And we can also see it's automatically assigned based on that right-click option. And then if we jump over to the update, the key difference there is, if we look at the properties of it, we're going to automatically add a requirement script for you. And that's going to make it so that this update is only applicable when you deploy it as required if there's an older version to kind of simulate the experience that you would get if you're, say, coming from Config Manager, where you can see things like required, not applicable. It would function very similar in Intune for the update version of a product. Okay, so that looks good. Let's go ahead and jump over to one of our Config Manager clients in our staging group. So we can see, for example, we have our Chrome update and our Java update showing up in the Updates tab. We can see we have an outdated version of Chrome with Java. And the reason this is showing in Software Center is because I allowed the user to install it before the deadline, which was 1 day from now based on that initial testing deployment. So one thing, if we check out, we can see if we open up Chrome, we can see we go to the default Google Chrome homepage. So let me go ahead and kick this off real quick. And what we're going to notice is that we're going to see the update being applied just like any other Microsoft update. So for example, if you go look at the Config Manager logs related to updates, you're going to see a lot of similar logs that you would be accustomed to for just standard Microsoft updates because they function the same exact way. So WUA handler, you'll be able to see things happening. Since this is a Patch My PC update or app, we do also have a log file that we put in the root of CCM logs that will show the actual update or application install and show exactly what we're doing. So for example, we can see that we're running the Google Chrome MSI, and we can see based on the right-click option, we automatically added the logging parameter, and we used the folder that you would have defined. So this is where the actual Chrome MSI log will be. So for example, if we go back to CCM logs, we can see we automatically created the folder for the client-side logs for apps, and we could actually go look at the verbose log for Google Chrome MSI if it ever failed, for example. So it makes troubleshooting really easy because we give you both our log as well as the actual installer log from whatever third-party product that you're deploying. So one thing that I don't know if you noticed, we did have a Chrome icon that got auto-deleted because we did enable that option to delete public desktop shortcuts. And now you can see if we go ahead and open Chrome, based on the post-action script, we automatically configured the homepage for all users based on that configuration. So we can see we automatically applied that at the organizational policy level where it couldn't be changed. So just an example of some of those customizations that we could apply if needed. Okay, so that looks good. So if we refresh, we can now see that Google Chrome went from 77 up to version 84. And we can also see if we jump over to the Apps tab of Software Center, we can see that we can go ahead and install that 7-zip application even if it's not already there. So that's just our available deployment that we did for all users. So we'll see once that kicks off, we'll be able to see that get installed. And same concept here, if we go look at the Patch My PC script runner, we'll be able to see once the 7-zip install kicks off, what's actually happening. So for example, here's where we ran the MSI for 7-zip, as well as the log that we automatically added as well. So if we go back into that vendor log that we created, we can see the verbose logging for the MSI there as well. So now if we refresh, we can see that we have 7-zip installed. Everything is good to go. And then we can go ahead and close that out. And you can see that we also give the uninstall within the deployment type, the uninstall is also configured for us as well. So if we wanted to deploy it as an uninstall, we could also remove those apps that we create. Okay, so that looks good from the client side. So let's jump over to one of our Intune clients and we'll show you what that looks like for both the available applications as well as the update that we deployed. So sometimes Intune can be a little bit slow, so hopefully this will kick in here in a second. Let's just take a quick look at our Intune management extension log just to see if we're getting policy. Sometimes this will take a minute or two before we actually have the app showing up in company portal as well as the update getting applied. So we can see that we do have the updates already appearing because they're available. They usually evaluate a bit quicker. So let's go ahead and kick off Google Chrome. So we can see that if we look at add or remove programs, this one is not currently installed for Chrome. And we can also see that we have an outdated version of 7-zip version 18. So we can see that we're starting to download that Win32 app that we auto-published. And let's take a quick look. So in addition to the normal Intune logs that you would see, we do also create some Patch My PC logs directly in program data where you can see information happening related to our updates or our applications. So for example, that same script runner log that we saw for the SCCM side of things, that also will apply for Microsoft Intune as well. So for example, that available deployment, we can see where we call the Google Chrome MSI. We could see where we automatically add the logging parameter. And the default option for the logging for the vendor logs is also in program data, and it's under the install log. So for example, we can see that we also have the Google Chrome installation log showing up right away as well. And we can see that we got a good exit code, for example. Let's go ahead and refresh. So we can see that we now have Chrome installed, and actually in the background, since it was a required assignment for the update version of 7-zip, we can see that 7-zip also auto-updated version 19 as well. And if we look back in the Patch My PC script runner log, we can see that this is where the 7-zip install actually applied automatically. And we can also see if we look at our vendor logs for installations, go back to program files or program data, vendor install logs, we can even see the update log as well for 7-zip being updated, the MSI verbose log. So definitely easy to troubleshoot if you ever did have anything weird going on, because we include both kind of what we do as well as what the vendor did for that update or app. So that looks good from the client side. I think we've got both our updates and apps kind of good to go. So let's jump back over and we'll just talk about some of the reports for the remaining time we have. So what's cool about this is that from a config manager perspective, we're using the normal software updates feature. So they just publish just like any other Microsoft update. So any of the native reports that you would be accustomed to under kind of the monitoring and reporting for SSRS, you could use any of those built-in ones. Now, in addition to that, we do also have some free dashboards that you can apply even if you're not a customer. So yeah, I guess that's one thing to note. So if you just like Google Patch My PC update dashboard, you can actually install these SSRS dashboards even if you're not a customer. They were originally done for an example post by a Microsoft support engineer. And then we just kind of put an installer to it so that you don't have to manually go change all the links for them to work correctly, as well as we updated a few of the newer operating systems that have come out since they were originally released. So once you install those reports, which you can do from the advanced tab of our publisher, you would just come over here and you would choose to install the SSRS dashboards and just tell us where your SQL server is. They're going to work just like any other report. So for example, we can see these are all the normal SCCM reports that are built in, and we just add a Patch My PC reports folder. And if we just run kind of the main dashboard, let's say that you want to look at security updates and normal updates for a classification filter, and then click view, this will give us a nice graph of kind of what our overall compliance looks like. It can be a little bit helpful compared to some of the built-in reports that are really just kind of tables, not really super helpful. For example, if you want to see a high-level view of everything that you're deploying. So these just give you a variety of charts and graphs for workstations, as well as for servers. You can break out by operating system for overall compliance. So just a lot of good data here that you can just check out based on some of these built-in reports. And once again, you can use that even if you're not a customer. You can go install that for free. And then we can break into, say, specific months, and you can see both third-party updates as well as Microsoft updates. So for example, in our production environment, we can see that we have 2 machines for Google Chrome that's still missing. That's a security update. So we could click into that specific update. Depending on how deep you drill in from the dashboard, we may take you into some of the native SCCM reports where you can get very specific about those updates that are missing, for example. So that one showed both third-party and Microsoft updates. We have another dashboard that looks just like that for third-party only. You can then limit to specific software update groups, and then just a few other ones that will just show you different application data that you can run based on that. But in addition to our reports that you can install, since everything's native and using the built-in scanning of SCCM, you can also use any existing reports, whether that's ones you built custom in-house. They would also be able to show third-party updates. Or here's an example of one of the free Power BI reports available from the Config Manager team at Microsoft. And we can see that if we look into some of the software update pieces of that, we can see that we also see third-party updates as well here. There we go. So that's kind of the Config Manager reporting. Of course, within the console, you can also go through and kind of see the traditional reporting, like what's the compliance look like within the software update group, for example. I think we just haven't probably summarized this data yet. And then, of course, at the update level, if you just want to get a quick view of something, you could go in and check the statistics just like any other Microsoft update here. And then from the Intune side, so this was actually one of the more challenging pieces that we had to figure out, is how can we actually monitor Intune? Because, for example, if we go and look at our apps in Intune, here we go. There's not really a good built-in way that we can look at the compliance for every single Win32 app or the update version of the app that we create unless you go manually click in on them, right? So from here, this is kind of the data that we would be most interested in, is what's the installed count, what's required, what's pending, and things like that. So what we actually did, just to try to make it so we could report on everything globally at once, is within our service under the Intune Apps, you can click on the Options tab and you can run the Intune App Manager utility. So what this is going to do, we're going to automatically query Microsoft Graph for you. And we're going to pull in a lot of this different data about the assignments that you've created either for the applications or updates. And what you can do with this data is you can export to a CSV file. And then what we have a Power BI template, which this actually we just created this this week. So we'll have a blog post. Just email me, justin@patchmypc.com if you want it now. But we'll have this released by the end of this week. So what you'll be able to do is you can come in here, you can export the CSV, and that will include every single app or update that you've assigned within Intune. And it's going to give us the states that we need in order to understand the compliance for your devices within Intune. So once you load up this report for the first time, you're just going to tell us where that CSV file lives. And then we're going to automatically read how many apps are currently required or have an install pending. And we'll be able to give you some insight for all the apps that you have published or all the updates that you have published. So if we want to look at apps only, for example, we can go look at our compliance and deployment statistics based on the deployment of apps. Or if you want to look at the updates only, we can show you based on how many apps you've published and deployed in Intune, how many are not deployed, and then how many are pending the installation, which would mean they're required, for example. So, for example, if we want to say, hey, show me all updates that were published on or deployed on the 13th of August, it looks like that's when the majority of our updates were published in our lab that we're looking at here. We could say, we want to drill into that, and that would show us, show data point. Let's see what we got. That would show us all the specific updates that we have, as well as when it was assigned, how many machines need the update, how many are failed, and things like that. So this was kind of cool. I just want to make sure that we show this. Is we're trying to give out options to expose data in bulk, which is kind of hard to do because it's not easy to do if you're just manually looking at the Intune console. You would either have to go to an individual device to check the assignments, or you would have to look at an individual app. So yeah, that looks good from the Intune side as well. So outside of that, I guess I'll quickly cover some pricing and then we'll go to Q&A. So what I showed today is the top tier of our subscription. So let me try to make that full screen. F12 maybe. No. Okay. We'll just look at it here. So the top tier of our subscription is $3.50 per year. That's going to include every feature that I showed in this demo. That's going to be both SCCM updates, SCCM apps, as well as Intune apps and Intune updates. Now, if you're only interested in the Intune piece for Intune apps and updates, you'd be good with the Intune subscription, which is $2.5 per device. And then if you only care about updates in SCCM and you're not interested in creating applications automatically in SCCM or Intune, you could do the enterprise only if you only cared about the updates. Only other thing I will mention, like we do have a minimum starting price. So just want to make sure that, if you're a smaller environment, you just understand that as well. But outside of that, this is the pricing per device per year. And yeah, hopefully that was a helpful demo. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the questions we have. Do you expire old updates? We do. So we don't necessarily expire them. What we actually do, let me jump over to one of our other labs. We create a supersedence relationship on them. So for example, depending on how you configure your software update point for how long you want to keep superseded updates available before expiring them, that would ultimately determine how long they stay around, right? So for example, in our lab, we can see that we keep superseded updates around for 1 month before we auto expire them. So if we come in here and look at our environment, under the updates, if we look at the vendor or patch my PC, we'll see that we should have some active updates, and then we'll also have some superseded updates as well. So it's just going to depend on how you deploy or how you've configured your SUP in order to expire superseded updates. So we do create superseded relationships with older versions. How do you do quality update or testing for update quality? Good question. So under our FAQ, we actually cover that pretty well. So we have 2 different labs that we run. We're going to have 32 and 64-bit versions of all applications. And what we do is we're going to test the upgrade. So that includes applicability rules, update exit codes, making sure we have good 0 exit codes during the upgrade, checking our installed rules. And we would check that for all these clients before we would ever release a new patch. So that would be the way that we test, and that would also be available in the FAQ if you ever want to reference that again.
All right. Thank you, Justin, for your session. I would like to invite, or we'd like to invite you, like all the other speakers, to drop your slides in a Ninja Zone. Further to this, you can feel free to answer, at least for the attendees, to ask more questions in the Ninja Zone. Maybe, Justin, you can have a look if there's anything more than this. And other than that, thanks again for your session. We'll do a 12 minutes break and then kick it off with Aaron and his session, How to Docs.
Yep, thanks everyone.
Many thanks, Justin.
Yep.
Always interesting to listen of all your thoughts about updating.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yep,
That's
thanks.
true. Thank you.